The year is 71 AD. Rome is a city of shadows and stone, recovering from the chaos of civil war. We are walking through the Argiletum, the district of the booksellers and the craftsmen. But as the sun sets, the noise of the market fades, and a different industry takes over the rhythm of the city. We are heading toward the Pholonaiki, the great Roman laundries. In the ancient world, there was no soap as we understand it. There were no chemical detergents or synthetic dyes. Instead, the Romans relied on the chemistry of the earth and the biology of the city. To clean the heavy, expensive wool of a senator's toga or the rough tunics of the labourers, the Romans used urine. It was a prized commodity because of its high ammonia content. Ammonia is a natural degreaser. It breaks down the oils in sheep's wool. It lifts the sweat and the dirt from the fibres, and when mixed with water and clay, it leaves the fabric whiter than anything else in the Mediterranean. Imagine the vats. Huge terracotta tubs sunk into the floors of these laundries. The workers, known as Pholones, stand in these vats all day and deep into the night. They are doing the fuller's dance. They jump and stomp rhythmically on the clothes soaking in the liquid. Thump, thump, thump. The sound is steady, like a heartbeat echoing off the brick walls. The smell is sharp. The pungent, biting scent of ammonia mixed with the earthy smell of wet wool and the wood smoke from the nearby furnaces used to heat the drying rooms. This liquid was not a waste product to the Romans. It was industrial fuel. Because the demand was so high, the city was lined with jars called gastrae. They were placed at the corners of busy streets, under the arches of the Subura, and near the entrances to the taverns. These jars were the mines of Rome. Every few hours, collectors from the laundries would arrive with carts, moving the jars through the narrow, winding streets. In the high heat of the Roman summer, this was the most essential and most invisible service in the city. The wealth of Rome was worn on its back. The white toga was a symbol of status, of purity, and of power. But that purity was maintained in the dark, damp basins of the laundry districts. It was a cycle of the city. The people provided the waste, the collectors provided the transport, and the Pholones provided the clean cloth. For decades, this trade was unregulated. It was a free-for-all of collection and profit. But Rome was changing. The old palaces of Nero had burned, the treasury was a hollow shell, and a new man had taken the throne. Vespasian. He was a man who grew up in the country, a man who had commanded legions in the mud of Britain. He looked at the city, and he didn't see statues or poetry. He saw a massive functioning machine that was leaking money. He saw the jars on the street corners. He saw the carts moving to the laundries. He saw the wealth being generated from the very waste of the population. And in his mind, he began to calculate. He began to see a new way to fund the rebuilding of the empire. Vespasian sat in the tabularium, the record house of Rome. He was a man of 60, with a face like a weathered cliffside, cracked, firm, and unyielding. Around him were the ledgers of the state. He knew that to secure the peace, he had to build. He had to build the Flavian amphitheatre, what we now call the Colosseum. He had to repair the temple of Jupiter, but the gold was gone. He looked at the industries of the city. Most things were already taxed: salt, grain, slaves, wine. But the Pholones were different. They were using a public resource, the waste of the citizens, to create private wealth. To a soldier like Vespasian, this was an inefficiency. He issued the edict, the vectigal urinae, a tax on the collection of urine from the public jars. If you wanted to gather the liquid gold of the streets, you had to pay the state for the privilege. The reaction in the city was one of shock, then laughter, then quiet resentment. The aristocrats in the hills mocked the urine emperor. They found it vulgar. They found it beneath the dignity of the Roman state to count the pennies of the latrines. His son, Titus, felt this shame most deeply. Titus was the golden boy of Rome, refined, popular, and conscious of his image. One evening, the story goes, Titus entered his father's study. The room was lit by a single bronze lamp. The air was quiet, save for the scratching of a quill on parchment. Titus confronted his father. He told him that the people were laughing. He said that the tax was a stain on the family name, that it was foul to profit from such a source. Vespasian did not look up immediately. He finished his line of accounting. Then he reached into a heavy leather pouch on his desk. He pulled out a single gold aureus, a coin freshly minted with his own stern image. He beckoned his son closer. He held the coin directly under Titus's nose. The gold caught the flickering light of the lamp. "Does it smell, my son?" Vespasian asked. His voice was a low growl, tired but steady. Titus squinted at the coin. He leaned in, breathing in the scent of the metal. "No," he replied. "Of course not. It is gold." Vespasian dropped the coin back into the pouch with a heavy clink. "And yet," he said, "it comes from the urine. Pecunia non olet. Money does not smell." This phrase became the unofficial motto of the Flavian dynasty. It was the ultimate statement of Roman pragmatism. It didn't matter if the source was the mud of the battlefield, the sweat of a slave, or the vats of a laundry. Once it was converted into the currency of the state, it was pure. It was power. It was the stone for the Colosseum. It was the bread for the poor. It was the pay for the soldiers guarding the Rhine. Let us look closer at the jars, the gastrae. They were placed in the busiest intersections of Rome, near the Subura, where the apartment blocks rose 6 stories high. In these blocks, there was no plumbing. Thousands of people lived in cramped wooden-framed rooms. For them, the public jars were a necessity of daily life. Every morning, before the sun had fully cleared the Alban hills, the collectors would begin their rounds. Imagine the sound of the wooden wheels on the basalt stones. The Vespasiani tax collectors were not just officials, they were inspectors. They made sure that the laundries weren't skimming off the top. They counted every jar. They weighed the output. This was the first time in history that a government had successfully monetized the biological presence of its citizens. Vespasian looked at a city of 1 million people and saw a mountain of untapped resources. He realized that the city itself was a biological factory. The economics of Pecunia non olet. When Vespasian took power, the Roman treasury had a deficit of 40 billion sesterces. To put that in perspective, a single soldier was paid about 900 sesterces a year. The empire was not just broke, it was dying. Vespasian was a man of the provinces. He wasn't born in a palace. He had sold mules to make a living before he became a general. He had a mule trader's eye for profit. When he sat with his son Titus, he wasn't just showing him a coin, he was teaching him a lesson in sovereignty. The lesson was this: a state cannot survive on pride alone. Titus looked at the laundry district and saw filth. Vespasian looked at the laundry district and saw the Flavian amphitheatre. He saw the limestone being quarried in Tivoli. He saw the iron clamps being forged to hold the stones together. He saw the sailors who would pull the massive awnings over the crowd to shade them from the sun. All of those men needed to be paid. They did not care if their silver denarii came from a spice merchant or a laundryman. After the dance in the vats, the work was not done. The clothes had to be rinsed in massive amounts of fresh water brought in by the aqueducts. Then came the fuller's earth, a type of clay that acted like a fabric softener, absorbing any remaining grease. Finally, the clothes were hung on semicircular wooden frames called vimina. Beneath these frames, the workers would burn sulfur. The fumes of the sulfur would rise through the damp wool, bleaching it to a brilliant, blinding white. Imagine the scene at dusk in the laundry district. Hundreds of these white ghosts, togas on frames, lining the rooftops, swaying in the breeze. The smell of sulfur and ammonia clashing in the air. This was the smell of Roman civilization. This was the smell of the money that Vespasian was counting in his palace. Let us drift into the smaller details of life in this year. While the tax collectors were counting coins, the average Roman was living a life of strange contradictions. 1. The diet of the commoner. If you were a laundry worker in 71 AD, you didn't eat off silver platters. Your diet was a steady, rhythmic intake of pulse, a thick grain porridge. It was seasoned with garum, the famous fermented fish sauce. Like the urine used in the laundry, garum was a product of time and decay. Fish guts were left in the sun in large vats until they liquefied into a salty, pungent umami sauce. Rome was a city fueled by fermentation. The smell of the garum shops mixed with the smell of the laundries, creating a thick sensory blanket over the lower districts. 2. The Great Fire of 69 AD. The Romans of 71 AD were still traumatized. Just 2 years prior, the Capitolium, the most sacred temple in Rome, had burned to the ground during the Civil War. Vespasian made a show of being the first to carry a basket of rubble on his own back to start the rebuilding. This was a PR masterstroke. He was saying, "I am not a god, I am a worker." This is why the urine tax, though mocked, was accepted. The people saw their emperor working in the mud with them. They saw the money going into the stone, not into golden statues of himself. 3. The hair of the elite. In 71 AD, the fashion for women was becoming increasingly absurd. This was the era of the Flavian coiffure. Noble women wore their hair in towering honeycombs of curls, supported by wire frames and heavy amounts of beeswax. To keep these structures standing, they required hours of work by specialized slaves called ornatrices. Often these slaves would use, you guessed it, bleaching agents derived from the same ammonia used in the laundries to lighten the hair to a fashionable reddish gold. 4. The midnight traffic. One of the strangest laws in 71 AD was the ban on wagons during the day. Because the streets were so narrow and the city so crowded, Julius Caesar had banned heavy transport during daylight hours. This meant that at night, just as you were trying to sleep, the city became a roar of iron-bound wheels. The urine collectors, the stone haulers for the Colosseum, and the grain merchants all moved at once. The quiet Roman night was actually a mechanical symphony of grinding stone and shouting drivers. For a Roman, The sound of a wagon wheel on cobblestone was the ultimate white noise of the empire. 5. The first pay toilets. Vespasian didn't just tax the collectors. He effectively created the concept of the pay-to-go system. While the large jars were free for the public to use because the collectors wanted the product, the more formal latrinae began to charge small fees. These were social clubs. Romans would sit in long rows on marble benches, chatting about politics and the latest chariot races, while water flowed beneath them in a constant stream. There was no privacy. To a Roman, the idea of a private bathroom was lonely. They preferred the hum of conversation, the pacing of the empire, closing the hour. As we reach the final minutes of our journey through 71 AD, think about the interconnectedness of it all. The emperor in his palace, the soldier on the Rhine, the lady with her towering hair, and the worker treading in the vat. All of them were bound together by a system of exchange that ignored the foulness of its source. The sun is beginning to rise over the Esquiline Hill. The first light of 72 AD is touching the top of the cranes at the Colosseum. The night shift of the Fullones is finishing. Their legs are tired, their skin is stained, but the laundry is white. The city is clean. The debt is being paid. Vespasian's coins continue to circulate. They pass from hand to hand, from the baker to the blacksmith, from the poet to the priest. They are washed by the sweat of the city, but they never lose their value. The empire is a machine that never stops. It consumes, it processes, and it builds. Rest now, knowing that the world has always found a way to turn its waste into wonder. The stones of Rome are heavy and warm. The fire has finally turned to a soft grey ash. The history of 71 AD is a long, slow breath. As the years passed, the tax became a normal part of Roman life. The collectors continued their rounds. The Fullones paid their fees. The empire's treasury began to swell. With that smell-less money, Vespasian transformed Rome. The ruins of the fire were cleared away. The massive concrete foundations of the Colosseum were poured. Thousands of tons of stone and mortar, paid for by the humble jars of the street corners. When you look at the ruins of Rome today, you are looking at the result of Vespasian's cold, hard logic. But the tax left a mark on the language itself. To this day, in Italy, the public toilets are often called Vespasiani. In France, they are Vespasiennes. The emperor's name became forever linked to the very thing he taxed. Imagine the city at night again. The tax collectors are counting their coins by candlelight. The laundries are finally falling silent as the last togas are hung to dry under the moon. The ammonia scent lingers in the air of the district, a reminder of the work that keeps the city white and clean. Vespasian eventually passed away, but his logic remained. He proved that an empire is not built on high ideals alone. It is built on the management of the mundane. It is built on the ability to find value where others see only waste. The fire in the study has gone out. The gold coins are locked away in the vaults beneath the temple of Saturn. The streets are empty. The only sound is the Tiber, flowing, always flowing, carrying the waste of the city out to the sea, while the gold stays behind in the hands of the state. History is not just the story of kings and battles. It is the story of the taxes, the trades, and the strange, quiet ways that a city survives. It is the story of a coin that has no cent, and a city that never stops working, even while it sleeps. The fire has finally settled. The orange flames have retreated, leaving behind only a deep, pulsing red glow in the center of the hearth. The shadows on the marble walls have lengthened until they have become the darkness itself. The story of Vespasian, of the jars on the street corners and the white togas of the Forum is now just a distant echo. The city of Rome has drifted into its deepest slumber. The heavy wooden gates are barred. The watchmen have gone silent. The coins are still. You are no longer a traveler in time. You are simply here, in the quiet, in the dark. The weight of history is no longer a lesson to be learned, but a blanket to keep you warm. The air is still. The mind is empty. The world is at peace. Take one final, slow breath. The gold is silent. The empire is at rest. And now, so are you. Sleep, sleep, sleep.